Hello, everybody. This is Lumerion, and as usual, when any IEM hype train takes off, I'm gonna be there in like 1-2 months, give or take. Always on time, eh? Well, nonetheless, it's here. The KZ Zex Pro, also known as the KZ CRN, a collaboration between KZ, the Chi-Fi brand whose claim to fame is rapid firing offerings all year around, and Critical, the man trying to assemble a harem of anime audio waifus. And also make some good IEMs as well, I guess. Well, you've seen the hype train. Now let's see if that train is still rolling strong in this review of the KZ Zex Pro /CRN. So it would seem that we have the standard KZ unboxing experience, which is a white cardboard box with the render of the Zex Pro on the front. Now on the side here you can see that I have the black version with the mic, some recyclable symbols, whatever. And in the back you have the specifications, which, it's whatever. Slide out the outer cardboard sleeve and you can see the Zex Pro in some inserts with basically a transparent cardboard flap hiding it. It's like a window, and here we go. Underneath that foam insert will be these standard KZ tips. They might look very clear colored, and though they might look different from usual, they're basically just the normal KZ tips, but this time in a clear color. And then of course you get the instruction manual / product warranty. It's printed mostly in English, except for this one part where it's Chinese, but there's English, but it's not like funny English. It's just English. And it's an instruction manual for earphones. You don't need this. And then you get this cable. KZ has actually changed up the cable recently. No more of that brown cable that you had before. This time you get this transparent looking cable. The construction of it is kind of reminiscent of the old Audio-Technica cable, so you have like just 2 wires that leads up to each ear, and the rubber sleeve, it has kind of a ribbed texture. One could say it's ribbed for your pleasure. This cable is alright. It's not too microphonic, although I still lament the lack of a Y splitter on this cable assembly. This one is also the mic'd version. It's the standard KZ mic clump. You've seen this since forever. I will put a audio sample of it, but I think by this point you know what to expect from this thing. It's okay. It'll do for your calls, and it's alright, but it's still like a step below like even the mic from your phone itself. This is a test recording of the KZ Zex Pro /CRN's microphone. The audio is coming from the included cable, which has a mic clump on it. The connectors are using the proprietary, KZ 2-pin connections. They have some plastic overmolding, so you might have some compatibility problems when you use this cable with other IEMs that aren't from KZ or one of its sister brands. And the over-ear molding here, it's soft. However, I think the curve here might be a little bit too tight, especially for bigger ears. For mine it was alright, but for bigger ears this will probably be a bit of a tight curve. As you can see here, I have the black version of the Zex Pro, but a side that makes contact with your ears is a transparent but darkened gray plastic, whilst the outer side is basically a matte black plastic front plate. There's also supposed to be a Critical logo on the top of the CRN version, but as I have the Zex Pro version, that is not present with mine. This is not the most appealing design ever, but it's okay. And this mold is basically the same as the CCA CA16 sister brand model, just with a different front plate. And it's also basically the same as my recently reviewed KZ Z1 True Wireless set. So yeah, you can see the same mold, the same nozzle. The Zex Pro has a different front plate, whereas the Z1 just has this plastic plate, but it's like a different design. So in terms of source matching, the KZ Zex Pro plays better with my LG V20. The brightness from the ESS Saber DAC in here gels better with the wonky treble of the Zex Pro than the DX150's warm but somewhat dull sound. As for tip rolling, the KZ Zex Pro has a pretty standard nozzle that should work fine with any ear tips you throw at it, and it doesn't change its sound drastically with tip rolling. So I'll be using these sort of smoky generic silicone tips with the red stem, but really just use anything that's like comfortable for you and you'll be fine. Even like the stock tips that KZ included are quite a good fit. And with that out of the way, let's get to the sound of the KZ Zex Pro. The KZ Zex Pro, also known as the CRN, tries to hit the preferred signature of Critical, and although the bass and the mids seem to be up to spec, the treble is just kind of your indicator, a red flag I guess, that this product is still very much a KZ. Starting with the bass, Critical touts that this bass implementation on the Zex Pro is more sub-bass focused, and I would agree. The Zex Pro outputs a bass performance atypical of other KZs. It's still got the quantity, but it does not bleed into the mids heavily, unlike other KZs. Bass texture is semi-soft, and although there is rumble, it's a little unsatisfactory for me. I wish it was a little stronger. And while I'm down for some sub-bass, I think the Zex Pro is actually lacking some mid-bass and would benefit from some EQing. So it's kind of weird to say this, but perhaps this bass is too clean for this KZ's own good. Again, a bit more mid-bass here would have thickened up the low end and given it a bit more oomph. The mid-range is again something you wouldn't think have come from a KZ product. It's clean, mostly neutral, and doesn't make the various musical elements trip over itself like other KZ offerings. Although some pitfalls are still present, such as the somewhat metallic timbre casted over these mids, most prevalent on vocals. If you haven't watched my HiFiMan RE400 review, well, go watch it. I'll leave it on here somewhere. But the mid-range here, it's of the Zex Pro, it's kind of similar to that, but a little more metallic. And my gripe with the RE400's mid-range applies here. It's kind of close to diffuse field, which makes all the elements of music have an equal standing, which is, it's kind of boring and dry for my taste. But if that's your thing, then short of the somewhat off timbre, the Zex Pro delivers. Now the highs, man, this is where everything falls apart. The bass and mids of the Zex Pro had a vision, and then the highs came in to drag it all down. Allow me to quote what I say about KZ's treble implementations in the KZ Z1 review. Yeah, the Zex Pro's treble follows the uneven peaky camp. It's kind of piercing, shrill, and also lacking extension. The amount of sibilance is acceptably tolerable, but the typical KZ graininess returns with a vengeance, something that even the normal KZ-X didn't have as bad. For how nice and clean the bass and mids of the KZ-X Pro is, these unrefined highs only serves as a bigger contrast, and it turns what could be a great sound signature down to just being okay. So the soundstage whiff of the KZ-X Pro to me is above average, but still isn't really anything to write home about. The beginnings of soundstage height are present, however, and give the various musical elements a bit more vertical space to play with than usual. All of this is to say that the soundstage performance of the Zex Pro is alright. Technicalities for the Zex Pro to me is a little complicated. This new driver tech that KZ employed in this and the Zex does make some subtle differences. However, I feel that the Zex Pro's tuning does not showcase it as well. And so the Zex Pro technical ability falls in lines with other KZs in the price range. It has average resolution and detail retrieval, but is able to show macro details very well to make up for that weakness. However, the standard shortcomings of imaging and like the Belsing BAs in here, which I think is the most likely culprit for that grainy treble, they are still very much a part of this IM. So between the KZ-Zex and the Zex Pro, for build quality, they're pretty much two sides of the same coin. They might be using different housing shapes, but it's pretty much the same materials, and although the Zex Pro is ever so slightly bigger, so keep that in mind I guess, but it's not that much. As for the sound, yeah, the Zex and the Zex Pro couldn't be more different. The Zex is more mid-bass focused with more bass bleed and a significantly warmer mid-range compared to the Zex Pro sub-bass emphasis and a more neutral take on mid-range. The highs of both are equally bad, but I prefer the Zex implementation more, if only because it didn't have as much graininess in it. The Zex actually showcases the new driver tech better. It sort of had more separation considering the already very tilted sound that it outputs, whereas with the Zex Pro's tuning, though more competent, it did not make use of the hardware as well. So yeah, the Zex and Zex Pro might share the same name and some of the innards, but their tuning really sets them apart. Frankly, although I prefer the Zex Pro over the Zex, if I had to pick, I wouldn't pick at all. Between the KZ-Zex Pro and the Blonde BL Max, yeah, for the build quality, the Blonde takes an easy win. Its matte metal aesthetic trumps the plastic of the Zex Pro. It's also heftier, adding to the overall feel of the product. Blonde also gives you the carrying pouch, which even if it kinda sucks, it's better compared to the KZ-Zex Pro's nothing. Sound-wise, if I critique the Zex Pro for a somewhat reserved bass, then the BL Max goes too far, muddling up the sound. Mids on the Zex Pro is definitely better, even if not to my taste. And as for the treble, though both aren't great, I still prefer the BL Max's implementation, if only because it doesn't have the graininess of the KZ. Yes, the graininess problem is that bad that it brings everything down. Technicalities wise, I'd say the Zex Pro is slightly better for details, but the timbre and soundstage height is a win for the BL Max. Overall, I would go for the Zex Pro for the more refined bass and mids, but if you are more of the bass head, then the BL Max is better suited for you. So, Is the KZX Pro the $30 Chi-Fi endgame that the audio community has been looking for all along? No. Sadly, it is not. That doesn't mean it's bad per se, just that it's a decent offering with some weaknesses that stop it from crossing the fence into the truly great territory. For me, the bass still needs a little more thickening, the mids are a little dry, and the treble is still a mess. This tuning also doesn't make use of the new driver as much, and it feels more like a nice sound signature being held back by the guts it inhibits. The lesson to take from this is, as my title says, temper your expectations. The Zex Pro is the most well-tuned KZ-AIM to date, but it's still far from perfect. It's best to treat this product as a sample of Clinical's sound preferences, and, it's to better gauge his tastes and gain more insights on his reviews. As well as maybe if you want like something like this, maybe go for Clinical's higher end collaborations, maybe that'll be better for you. Otherwise, it's safe to say that this hype train has perhaps been a bit overblown. And with that, we have reached the end of another review. Of course, as usual, like the video if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more of this. If you have any questions or inquiries, comment down below the video. I also have a Patreon if you want to donate to that, if you so want to. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next review. This is Lumerion, signing off.